Mark Carney, nice to see you. Thank you for making the time today.
Thanks for having me, Rosemary.
You outline in this book three major crises that you see that we are facing: COVID, obviously, climate change, also obviously, and credit. I want to start with COVID because it's sort of top of mind for everybody. You talk about it, and certainly we've all experienced it, how this pandemic has exposed real societal inequities in terms of who is protected, who does or doesn't get the virus, who is more deeply affected because of those inequities. Do you think as a result of this pandemic that anything will change in a meaningful way to address some of those gaps that we are seeing?
Well, first, thank you for reading the book, Rosemary, and for raising this issue, because I think it goes to the heart of it. Yes, the crisis unfortunately has shone a light and in many respects deepened inequities in our societies and societies across the world. And it's down to all of us to address those. Certainly for some of us, as difficult as the time has been, we've been able to carry on with our professional lives in relatively safe circumstances, while others have had to go out literally to the front lines, thinking of our healthcare workers, our first responders, but those others who provide essential services to us at personal risk and with great challenges. And the question is, well, how did we end up in this situation? How did we become unbalanced between what we're valuing in markets and what we value as a society? And having recognized these challenges, what will we do about it to bring those back into balance?
You do write that at one point that you are surprised that that nations, most nations, were not prepared for this, that there had been plenty of warnings, that Canada and other nations had not, for instance, stockpiled personal protective equipment adequately. Why do you think nations didn't take those warnings seriously? And what do you think will be done as a result of what we've experienced?
Let's be blunt. I mean, there's no joy in the fact that everyone else did a terrible job on this. We weren't prepared. We weren't prepared in terms of PPE stockpiles. We weren't prepared in terms of vaccine capacity, other aspects, and that is a reality. And we're living with the consequences of that. We weren't prepared, and ultimately haven't been fully prepared and developed testing and tracing, which would have helped with the way we can cope with this situation. And look, I'm partly, obviously I'm a prisoner of my past and the experience that I've had in the financial sector. And the financial sector, with few exceptions, Canada being one of them, was not prepared for the crisis of 2008. But it's partly attitudinal to be prepared for those crises. You have to think about what could go wrong. You have to prepare for what could go wrong. But it's fundamentally a responsibility of government. And so we're going to need to reorganize ourselves in these respects. We're going to need to think about domestic capacity for resilience in health, in cyber, and other areas, in climate resilience against climate change as well. And that is a mindset, and that will cost some money, but it's investment in protection of Canadians ultimately, and it will pay off over time.
Do you think particularly our ability to produce vaccine in this country was a failure? It was a mistake, that was not by any particular government, but that it was abandoned by multiple governments?
I think we've learned a lesson from that, and I think a more general lesson, which is that in the extreme, it's very hard, and it's hard to rely, and in fact, it's hard to rely on the global system. It's hard to rely on foreign sourcing of PPE. Remember, we and others were stuck if you didn't have domestic production capacity in PPE to get it in time. We've had the challenges on the vaccines, which were inherited. Just to be absolutely clear, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm making a general point. But when we think about resilience, resilience will come from Canadians. It will come from our own domestic capacity.
As someone who lived through and worked through the 2008 recession, I wonder when you see the level of government spending that has happened around the world, but in this country in particular, billions and billions of dollars, almost unimaginable amounts of money. Was there any other option from what you could see in terms of propping up Canadians and the economy? Was that the only thing to be done? Is it the only thing to continue to do? How do you start to pull that stuff back?
No, I mean, the approach was right. It continues to be right to, we've had to shut down a big part of our economy for health reasons. And we're bridging during this period to when we can properly reopen that economy. And we want Canadians as connected to their jobs, the jobs they had before, and we want those businesses as much as possible to have the best opportunity to reopen and to prosper. So it is the right thing to do. I'm not going to quibble about exact orders of magnitude or targeting or all that. Broad brush, it's the right thing to do. The issue, though, as you say, is as we start to come out and as the vaccines are rolling in and as Canadians are vaccinated, as we start to come out, what is the right path for for finances? What's the right path for the economy? And I think here again, we've got to recognize that dollars spent today are dollars that we may not be able to spend tomorrow. It matters how we spend as we come out. In my view, and I write in the book, that what we will need to do, what other countries will need to do, is that for the emergency spending, the COVID type spending, the combination of that plus the sort of current everyday spending of the government, we need to bring that back into balance, in my view, in the medium term. Think 3 to 5 year type horizon. But what we need to do alongside that is make major investments in this economy.